Very good. Okay, good. What do you say, Nasin? A gesunte Zuma? Okay, whatever that means. Anyway, you're based on the last Mishnah. Now, the Kiyotzeba means similar to this. Now, this Mishnah has no shakas to the previous Mishnah. The previous Mishnah had said that if a person kills, he goes from neighborhood to neighborhood. He doesn't go, and Ben Levi goes from city to city. He goes to a different city. So what's the kayotzeba? Right, seach shegolo le'ir miklatai. All right, seach that goes to a ari miklat. V'rotzu anshi ha'ir lechabda, and the people want to be mechabed him. Yomer lehem, he says to them, right, seach ani, as you say, ears all listen. You should know that I'm a murderer. I'm a murderer. In other words, if they say we don't care that you're a murderer, we'll accept you. So where's the chayotzeba over here? What's the connection to what? To a Ben Levi going from city to city. So there are people not gairis it, and there's another shot over here. Just like the Levi who's in Golos has to go to another city, and the reason is that his lave should be machnia. In other words, the purpose of Golos is to humble you. So let's say you're in you're Ben Levi in city A, and you kill somebody, and you remain in city A because it's not a miklat, you're not humbled. So you go to city B. That's the kayotzeba. Even though they want to be machabed you have to say, no, I'm a Ritzeach. So that would be a very, very nice segue one to the other, because kiyotzeba means a segue. You're segueing in. So A, you're not gairis, it is the easy way out. B, this would be a very nice pshat that you're segueing in from, just like the Levi goes from a different city to machnia, humble him. So too the person, the Ritzeach, if obviously they wanted mechabed him, he had some type of prestige, right? He said something, and nonetheless he says, no, you don't do it. Now this is geschmack, fellas. We use v'zeh devar ritzeach for the Rabbi saying that the ritzeach speaks to the goyel adam. We had a question: who speaks to the goyel adam? Two Talmidei Chachamim, or Rabbi said he speaks himself. Where was Rabbi? Zeh devar ritzeach. This is, guys, the Rabbanan's response, right? Because we never said, what do they do with it? They do with it this. That he has to tell them, you know what? I am a Ritzeach. I'm a Ritzeach, and please do not go on and give me covet. I'm in Aleph. They'd have to pay wages to the Levi. They'd have to pay wages to the Levi. Good. Now, they would go ahead and pay their wages. They would go ahead, the Levium would pay, the Ritzeach would pay the Levium, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir is Mekel Oimer Lehoyu Malam Lem Schar. They didn't go ahead and give them schar. In other words, once you killed B'Shogeg, says Rabbi Meir, you went to the Ari Miklat, you did not have to pay the rent. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you did. A second leniency of Rabbi Meir and a chumrah of Rabbi Yehuda. The chayz l'shvara shahayaba div Rabbi Meir. If the person had a position of prestige, look at Rashi, fellas. Second line down. Chayz l'shvara shahayaba. Im haya nasi. If he was a nasi, a king, a roish beis av. Chayz l'gudasa. He gets back to his position. Kishayashiv la'orei. The Irei Mises Kain Gadol. After the death of the Kain Gadol, he would go back to his previous position. Again, it's the lenient position of Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Lahoya Chayzer L'Shrara Shahayaba. He would not go back. So Reb Meir is Mako in this regarding rent and regarding return to previous position, whereas Rabbi Yehuda is Machmer. Amr Rav Kahana. Says Rav Kahana, Machloikis. The Machloikis, right, is when you have to pay or not. The rent is b'sheish, is in the 6. Betzer, Rameskila, Shrem, we spoke it out. The 6, the 3 from Moshe Rabbeinu, and the 3 from Yeshua, right? In those cases, there's the machlokes. The Masava Lochem, the pasuk says, fellas, V'hoyu Lochem ha'orim lemiklat migoyel, and these 6 cities should be to you for a refuge from the Goyel, the Redeemer. V'loy Yomus haritzeach ad amdu fnei ha'eda la mishpat. So when it says V'hayu lochem ha'orim lachem for you. These 6 are for you, meaning lachem. And there's the machlokes. How far do you teach lachem? And therefore, but the other 42, everyone would agree you have to pay your way. Okay, it's only lachem with these 6, as the Gemara says now. The Masav lachem leklita. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion these 6 cities should be for you leklita. They should be for you a refuge, but only refuge. But regarding paying your way, you'd have to pay your own way. Umasava and Rabbi Meir is of the opinion lachem lechartzachechem for all your needs, including your rent. You wouldn't have to pay your rent. So, in other words, and it only says lachem by those 6. Avol be'aboyim mishtayim, but the other 42 city alaviyim, which had halacha of ari miklat, divri akol, even Rabbi Meir would be moida, hayu ma'ilem schar, you have to pay rent. Amalei Rava, havadei lechem l'chol tzachechem mashma. Vadei lechem means l'chol tzachechem. In other words, if you're going to darshan lechem, it means l'chol tzachechem, and it means in the 6. Even Rabbi Yehuda would be moida, you do not have to pay your rent. In other words, when you say lechem leklita, that's not the mashmois of lechem. The mashmois of lechem is for all your needs. So if you're going to make this drasha of lechem, even Rabbi Yehuda would be maida that you don't have to pay. Ella amarava, good geschmack. I admit it. You're right. Lachem l'chotzachechem. In the 6 cities, everyone is maida. Even Rabbi Yehuda, you do not have to pay your rent. Machloikis, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, whether you pay rent or not, is babayim ushtayim. In the other 42, the masava v'aleim titnu ki hanach. So what does the pasuk say? Ve'esaorim asher titnu la'leviim, and the cities which you'll give to the Leviim, asheshari miklat asher titnu la'nushama ha'etzayach, va'aleihem titnu abayim shnei masa. And to them you will go ahead and give 42. So here's the question, fellas. Those other 42 aleihem, are those like the other 6 in total halacha or not? If they're like the total 6, then you don't have to pay your rent. If they're not like your total 6, you do have to pay your rent. And that's the machlokes. Rameya says the 42 are exactly like the 6th, and therefore you don't have to pay your rent. And Rabbi Yehuda's of the opinion that you do. Let's see it inside. The Masav Rameya is of the opinion, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion, it's just like those. What are you telling me, fellas? When you say the context of the pasuk is you're speaking about a specific special thing about these cities, which is that they protect the Ritzeach. That's what you're saying. In other words, you have these 6 cities that are already miklat. Sure, it says lechem by them. And now, in addition, you have another 42. They should be like these. Be like these what? So it says Rabbi Yehuda, the fact that they're koilet like that, but not that what? Totally like that, because it doesn't say lechem. Umasava and Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion, va'aleim titnu ki hanach. And on them, these 42 should be like the 6. Ma hanach, these 42, l'chol tzachechem is for all your needs, meaning that you don't have to pay your rent. Says Rameya, afhani nami, so to the other 42, l'chol tzachechem. Avol b'sheish, devri akol, lehoya mailan schar. So in other words, if you kill b'shoigeg, and you're a cheap guy, make your way to one of the 6. You'll get off cheap. He said, Chayz l'shwara shahayuba, machloikis, does he go back to the previous position? Rameya says he does, and Yehuda says he doesn't. Rameya says he goes back to his previous position, and Yehuda is of the opinion he does not go back to his previous position. What's the svaras and machloikis? It's a pasuk. Tan Rabbanan. This is by Eved Ivri, fellas. What does it say by Eved Ivri? V'yatzim imach hu ubanov. He'll leave. He knows. V'shav al mishpachta. He'll go back to his mishpacha. Ve'lachus es avaysav yashuv. And to the achusa, the inheritance of his father, he shall return. So what are we darshan? V'shav al mishpachta ve'lachus es avaysav yashuv. That's the pasuk. The mishpachta hu shav. He returns to his family. Ve'in shav l'mashech ziku avaysav. But he doesn't go back to what his fathers were machzikin. It means a prestigious position that his fathers had, I guess, for him. Divrei Reb Yehuda, Reb Meir, afu shav l'mashech ziku avaysav. He'd even go back to that, the prestigious position. Elachus is avaysav ke avaysav. Just like his fathers are, and so him. V'chein begoyla. The same halach by Eved Ivri would apply by what? By Wari Miklat. Kashu oimer yashav l'rabas esaret seyach. Mai v'chem begoyla kedetanya. Yoshev haritzech l'eretz achuzaso l'eretz achuzas hushav vein shav l'mashach tzikra avoisav. That's Tivei Rabbi Yehuda. Ben Me'omer afu shav l'mashach tzikra avoisav. He goes back to the previous position because Gama Shiva Shiva mihasam. He learns out loud from Evet Kanaini. Hajan lecha elo agoylin. Hajan lecha agoylin. Hajan lecha agoylin. So it's very interesting. The Masech is called Masech Makos. The first parak is Eidim Zaymimim. The second parak is Galus. Okay, let's go. It's Pashut. Why? The first parak is Eidim Zaymimim because that was the segue from Masechta Sanhedrin, right? Bas Kohen doesn't get the Eidim Zomim do not get what she gets; they get what he gets, and we segue. And there's one the Eidim Zomim that don't get anything. Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza. In addition, then we said another case that doesn't get. That's the case of a person who testifies about Galus. We therefore digressed into Galus. Now, finally, we get to what? We get Elohein ha-Goylim, which really is, guys, I once heard that Masechta Makos was once upon a time part of Sanhedrin, which will make a lot of sense. Think about the Prakim we saw in Masechta Sanhedrin. Elohein ha-Niskolim, Elohein ha-Nechmakim, Elohein ha-Nisrafim, right? And so Elohein ha-Goylim, right? It would make sense. And the ones who get Malchus are many, many more. And therefore, it has really its own Masechta. And the Masechta really begins over here. This is the Masechta Makos. You have about 10 or 11, 10 and a half plot of Malchus with other digressions. So this is much more difficult than the first previous two Prakim. I warn you. However, you're familiar with much of it. And it's very Geshmak. It's very Geshmak Yedias. Yedias-wise, it's very, very tremendous amount of Yedias, and I can't believe Kenny's by the Kaisel learning, and we're having a geschmack as anything. Gedenks, we learned Yevamis Yutes by the Kaisel fellas in 1999. I gave Shir by the Kaisel in 1999. It was one of the greatest days for that. Remember that the guy with the kugel, the Yerushalmi kugel, the tikkun? He opened that up. It's geschmack as anything. Okay, anyway. The Elohim Aloikin. These are the one who get Malchus. The first ones, guys, are all, notice, these are all chayve krisos. There's a bunch of arroyos, and all these arroyos are chayve krisos. So, habala choso, someone's with his sister, aches aviv, al aches imoy, half sister, achos ishto, right, his sister-in-law, ashes achiv, what, his sister-in-law from his brother, al ashes achi aviv, his aunt, valanida. All these are chayiv karis. Anyone is with that, even though you're getting karis, which is going to be the lumdus over here, nonetheless, we're going to get Malchus. Almonul Kohen Gadol, it's a lav. Grusha v'chalutza the Kohen Hedyet, a lav. Chalutza machloikas Rashi and Tosfos, is it the Raisa or the Rabbanon? Mamzeres unesina Yisrael. Yisrael can't marry a mamza. Bas Yisrael can't marry a mamza. A ben Yisrael can't marry a mamzeres. Nesina were the Gevoinim, right? They were the nation from the Zion Umois that tricked the Yeshua, they made a shvua. Bas Yisrael in a sin. Ula mamzer. Almana v'gerusha chayav l'em mishum shtei shemos. Almana and gerusha yichayev for two shemos. In other words, if you had a woman who was married, she was an almana. She married a kohen. Now she's what? Was she married? Didn't have to marry a kohen. Married somebody else. Now she's a gerusha, and the kohen gadol would marry her, or even the regular kohen would marry her. Well, only the kohen gadol, because he's only kohen gadol is muzar and an almana. You'll be over on shtei shemos. Gerusha v'chalutza in a chayev elim mishum achas. Gerusha v'chalutza would only be one. Now let's see Rashi over here. First Rashi, guys, you say this to Rashi. Elohein Aloikim. Elu lav dafka. When it says these are the ones get Malchus, it's not at all comprehensive. It's not comprehensive. It's lav dafka everything. The ton of Ishaya, because we're learning and we're leaving out. Like Tuva, we're leaving out many things. Guys, it doesn't say in the Mishnah if you eat chaza. You get Malchus for eating chaza. Shteitnish. It doesn't say that. In other words, every case in the Mishnah here has its own unique chiddush, and that's why we're learning it. Every case over here has its own unique chiddush, and thus it's listed. So Rashi is going to go through the list. Beautiful Rashi. Elatona chayve krisis, mashmiinon diyesh malchus b'chayve krisis. Okay, go through the first case. Achoisai, aches aviv. These are all aroyas that chayiv karis, fellas. Yes. Nonetheless, that you usually say "Kam le b'derabmine," even though you chayiv karis, you will get malchus. That's the chiddush of our Mishnah. It's coming to mechadish. Not the chiddush is not that these are chayiv malchus. Guys, the chiddush is you will receive malchus. That a chayve chorus receives malchus. And you don't say chorus pat is it. That's the chiddush. That's so alien aloikin is a little misnomer. It's not. These are the ones that get malchus. These are the ones that get malchus b'chiddush. There's a chiddush why they get malchus, right? Very, very geschmack. He's a chayve chorus. Now, the next set was not chayve chorus. Almona, kohen gadol, right? Gerusha. V'tan almona v'gerusha lashminon. Almona gerusha chayv le mishum shtei shemos. That you be chayiv for if a kohen gadol marries, you be chayiv twice, right? That's a chiddush. That now chayiv next. Okay, now the next set we didn't learn yet, so let's stop here and we'll come back to it. Let's go back to the Mishnah now because we're going to learn some more cases. Next set, hatamei she'achal es hegdish, a person who's tamei tumas aguf and eats hegdish, he gets kares. V'habal el migdash tamei. Someone who goes into the base of Mikdash when he's tamei gets kares, and you're getting malchus. For oichel chaylev, someone eats chaylev. Chaylev is the forbidden fat of a karbanis. That the parts that go to Hashem are forbidden for us to eat. V'dam, dam nefesh is a chi of kares. Noiser left over from carbon is a chi of kares. Pigel, if four machshavas of dam. In the Shchita Kabbalah Halacha is Rika, you had a machshav of chutz lizman to do it at a different time. Is a chi of kares. Tamei, a person who eats food that's tamei. This is not a chi of kares. You're tahar. You're eating tamei to kakacha. Vashoichit, or someone who shechts a carbon machutz. Umayla, someone who is makriv a carbon machutz. That's the chi of kares. Va'oichel chametz bepesach. Okay. You would eat chametz for Pesach, you would get kares. If you eat on Yom Kippur, you get kares. If you go ahead and you do avoid on Yom Kippur, you get kares. You copy the ingredients of the shemen amishcha, you get kares. Or you mefatim the ketores, you also get kares. And you use the Shemen HaMishcha of Moshe Rabbeinu. Fellas, if you make your own Shemen HaMishcha and you go ahead and smear it on you, you get nothing. You get whatever it smells like. But on the other hand, if you use Moshe Rabbeinu's, then you're going to get kares. Okay? These are all a chi of lav. This is a chi of lav, but you're going to get malchus. If you eat tevel, that the nit it wasn't what you didn't separate the trumas and the maisa. So in there, you get your chayiv misa b'dei shemayim because there's truma in there. In addition, if you maisa rishon that the trumas maisa was not separated for the kohen, you're also going to get misa b'dei shemayim. U'maisa sheni behegdish shloi niftu, maisa sheni behegdish that is not poida. Okay, you be chayiv, you get malchus for all of these. Now let's go back to Rashi. We learned tevel and ma'aser rishon that you didn't separate the trumas ma'aser. Because it doesn't say they're lav openly. In other words, what the chiddush over there is what it's a chiyuv b'dei shemayim. If you notice the chiyuv by malchus by what by kares, so it doesn't seem such a chiddush to say there's malchus by misa b'dei shemayim. So what's the chiddush? The chiddush is that it's not an open lav. It's not an open lav. We'll derive all these in the Gemara. V'chein hegdish lo nifta. In addition, hegdish lo nifta is also the lav is not open. I did tani hegdish tana ma'aser sheni. Once you bought in hegdish that wasn't redeemed, we bring a ma'aser sheni that wasn't redeemed. Behadid travayu malchus titu mishum mechusrei pedia. They get malchus for the same but the same cause. They're lacking redemption. V'chein beroiv yesh davar chiddush. In the majority of them, there is a davar chiddush. The majority of these things, there is a davar chiddush. Okay, the rest again, a long Mishnah with a lot of information. Now, kama yoichel min tevel v'yichayiv. How much would you eat from tevel in order to be chayiv? Reb Shimon oime kol shehu. Reb Shimon says kol shehu. We have a Gemara, fellas, that shiurim is lachem mashmi Sinai, Gemara in Sukkah, right? So it says Reb Shimon that what? No, so Reb Shimon says kol shehu. The chachamim ma'imim kazayis. It's a kazayis. Amalei Reb Shimon imatem moidemli boichel nemala kol shehu shuchayiv. If you eat an ant, what's the halacha? You chayiv. So therefore, if you eat what? A grain of tevel, you should be chayiv. Amruloi, They said mefneshu kibriyasa, but literally because it's like it's created. You're eating the ant like it's created. So amalahem afchita achas kibriyasa. If you eat a kernel, you're eating the way the kernel was created. Now, really, what the Chachamim meant, you're eating a balchai, you're eating a beria, you're eating a whole hefts of something. That's what they meant. Okay, this dialogue will be what in the Gemara. The first part of the daf, actually the whole daf, is to focus on the sheet. Who is the Tana of the Mishnah? So let me give you three sheetas, and they're very famous. They come up in Shas. The first sheeta is Rabbi Yishmael. Says Rabbi Yishmael, whether it's chayve krisus or whether it's chayve misas bezdin, you would receive malchus. So if a person would be mechal Shabbos, chayv misa, you'll get malchus. Avodah zara, you'll get malchus. Again, this is machloikis in the Gemara. What did you warn him? Did you warn him you're going to get skila for Shabbos, or did you warn him you're going to get malchus? We'll see in the Gemara. Says Rabbi Yishmael, you're not only chayve krisus would you get malchus, but chayve misas bezdin. Says Rabbi Akiva, no, only chayve krisus will receive malchus. Chayve misas bezdin won't. Says Rabbi Yitzchak, chayve krisus will receive no malchus at all. So, who's the Tana of a Mishnah? It has to be Rabbi Akiva. Guys, let's go through it outside, eye contact. It can't be Rabbi Yishmael, because Rabbi Yishmael is of the opinion even chayve miso will get malchus. We didn't mention chayve miso. One case in our Mishnah was we never mentioned chayve miso. Can't be Rabbi Yishmael. It can't be Rabbi Yitzchak, because Rabbi Yitzchak holds chayv karis, you don't get malchus at all. Our Mishnah is saying chayv karis do get malchus. Who's the Tana of our Mishnah? It's Rabbi Akiva. So now, what we're going to do now is go through two sheetas. We're going to go through the sheeta of Rabbi Yishmael, why you get Misa and Malchus, and the sheeta one of Rabbi Akiva. That's what we're going to do today. Says the Gemara. Chayve krisis katani. The Mishnah learned a bunch of cases of chayve karis. Chayve misas bezdin like katani. It did not list one case of chayve misas bezdin. Let's see the Rashi. Kol chayve krisis she'ein bahem misas bezdin huskru b'mishasenu. All cases of chayve karis that does not accompany with Mrs. Bezdin, we mentioned in our Mishnah. Le'inyan Malchus. V'echem mikol chayve Mrs. Bezdin lo husker ba lilkos in hasru by Malchus. The guide, we didn't list one case of Mrs. Bezdin if you gave hasra, very important last words in Rashi, guys, in hisru by Malchus. If you gave hasra for Malchus, we didn't list it. In other words, you tell a person who's being mechal Shabbos, be aware if you're mechal Shabbos, you're going to get Malchus. No, you don't. You don't get malchus. You don't get malchus, right? The case of our Mishnah is, oh, you're going to be with your sister. Guess what? You can get malchus. Get malchus. Okay. So obviously it can't be Rabbi Yishmael. Back in Amid Beis. Amid Beis. So money. No, excuse me. I skipped the list. Skip a little important last line. Money. Who's the Tana? It's Rabbi Akiva. The Tana is Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya. Echad chayve krisus, the echad chayve misas bezdin, whether it's chayve krisus or chayve misas bezdin, yeshnei bechal malchus abayim. They're all bechal malchus abayim. This has Rabbi Yishmael. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. So either not only karis, but even misas bezdin, right? Says Rashi, yeshnei bechal malchus abayim, hashta salkedaitach shem hisu ba misa umalchus like umes. The havamina now is you gave asura for both. And you would get both. That's again, we'll deal with that soon, maybe tomorrow. Rabbi Akiva says, "Chayve krisis yeshnei b'chal malchus abayim." Chayve krisis does get malchus abayim. Shem asu tshuva. You know why it gets malchus abayim? Because if you do tshuva, bezdin shel maila moichlon lehem. Since it's karis, it's in the hands of the bezdin shel maila. The bezdin shel maila will go ahead and forgive you. Chayve misas bezdin ain't b'chal malchus abayim. However, chayve misas bezdin is not Shemasu Tshuva ain't Bezdin Shal Ma'ita Moichlem Hem. It's not in the hands of Bezdin Shal Ma'ita to be Moichl you. Their job is to carry out Mrs. Bezdin. So Mela, therefore you don't get Malchus. Okay, what's the lumdus over here? Let's see Rashi. Rabbi Kiva Oimer Chayve Krisus Im Hisu Behem Malchus. Again, if you gave Hasra for Malchus, Yeshna Bechlal Malchus. They're in the ballpark of Malchus, Viloikin, and they will receive that. Ve'ein kam mishum chayve shtei rishuyos. So guys, all you are sitting there and you're saying to yourselves, Lays, come lay b'derabmine. How could you get Karis and Malchus, right? You can't only get one, you can't get two. And you know what the answer is? Why is it not a case of two rishuyos? Because you can get off the hook by karis. So therefore, you know what it's considered, guys? One. It's considered one. Why? Because I can get off the hook. I can get off the hook by the karis. It's ein b'chal malchus. Sheyesh kan shtei peronios, malchus umisa, umishiyilaka seifa lahareg, and even if you get malchus in the end, you're going to get killed. Shafilu yaset tshuva, you can do tshuva behind his morgan. Ein bezin shal mata moichlin loy es hamisa. So it's mashma from Rashi, fellas. The reason Rabbi Akiva holds that you can't go ahead and get malchus and misa and malchus is because it's going to blind two rishuyos. Because you can't get rid of the misa. You could get rid of the malchus al yedei what tshuva. You can't get rid of the misa al yedei tshuva. The mainly you don't get malchus and misa. Good. That's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, which is the opinion of our Mishnah. The third opinion, which I mentioned to you, is Rabbi Yitzchak Oimer chayve krisis b'chal hayu. Okay, they don't bring it down over here. Rashi brings it down. I should get a chumash, fellas. Let me get it. So in the end of Parshas Achrimos, you have a very comprehensive parsha of Arayos. It goes through the whole parsha of Arayos. And then it gives the following summary. Perik Yuches Pasuk Chavtes. Ki kol asher yaseh mikol ha'ta'evos eila. Anyone who does from these abominations, and these nefashos, they'll be cut off from among their people. So there's a karis going on the whole parsha. In the parsha, fellas, is achoso. In the parsha of Arayos is achoso. Good? So what do I know from Parshas Achrimos? That chas v'shalom, a person's mezana with his sister, you're going to get karis. That's what it says in Parshas Achrimos. This is what it says in Parshas Kedoshim. The isha sheyikach es achoso, bas avivoy bas imoy. A person takes his sister, either his sister of his daughter of his father or his mother. V'roes ervasa, v'isiras varsoi, chesedhu, v'nichresu le'enei b'nei amam, ervas achosa gilo avon yisa. It says v'nichresu le'enei b'nei amam. Why do you have to tell me that? You already told me kikola asher yasem kikola teves ela v'nichresu, right? Why do you have to go ahead in achoso in Parshas Kedoshim take it out? Now we have a rule: anything that's in a klal and comes out from the klal is to teach me about the whole klal, right? That's the limit over here. Says Rabbi Yitzchak, chayve krisis b'chal hayu, right? Chayve krisis b'chal meaning b'chal achosos b'chal chayve krisis. V'lama yotzes karis b'achoso. Why is karis going ahead and taken out? Right? Why is he taken out from achoso? L'dona b'karis v'lei b'malchus, to teach me you only get karis and not malchus. Okay, so we have three shitas. Shitas Rabbi Yishmael is what? Misa malchus. Shitas Rabbi Akiva, not misa, only karis and malchus. Shitas Rabbi Yitzchak, only karis. And clearly, the only tanos of the Mishnah of those three is Rabbi Akiva. He's the only one who would fit in. Rabbi Akiva is the only one of the three that would fit in. My time with Rabbi Yishmael. What's the reason Rabbi Yishmael? D'chsiv, im loy sishmar, the pasuk says, im loy sishmar lasois es kol dibri atayra azois, haksuvim b'teif sefer hazel yiras Hashem, hanichve v'anoira hazeh, es Hashem elokecha. So that's what the pasuk says. That's the Vorim Chav Ches, pasuk Nun Ches. In the next pasuk it says, "V'hifla Hashem es makoischa, ves makos arecha, makas gedolos, v'nemanis v'chaloyim roim v'nemanim." That's pasuk Nun Tes. So you have anyone it says Imloy Sishmalasa says Kol Divrei Torah, and then right in the next pasuk it says V'hifla. Says the Gemara. Uksiv V'hifla Hashem es makoischa. Hafla zu eni yodea mahi. I don't know what this hafla is. Kishu oimer v'hipilu ha'shofet, the shofet will go ahead and bow him down, sort of. V'hikolu lefanov, and he'll get he'll get malchus in front of him. Havi oimer hafla zu malchus. I would say that's hafla is malchus. Uksiv and leisish malasis is kol. So it's mashma the kol Torah. You would get malchus. In other words, Rabbi Shmuel seems to be even more comprehensive than we thought. We thought he said only by Misa and Karis would you get Malchus. It's mashma, according to him, you get Malchus al kol Torah kula. As kol divya Torah azos. And then it says, you're going to get, next pasuk says you get Malchus. So the Gemara will question that. Says the Gemara, Ihachi, if you're telling me as kol Torah azos is going, the Hifla is going back on the whole Torah, chai v'eseinami. Can you marry a mitzvah shlishi? Say yes. Good. Can you marry a sheni? No. You know why? Because it only says you can marry a shlishi. That's called a lav haba mechal aseh. From telling you what you can do, you can infer what you can't do. So Mimela, I can marry a shlishi, I can't marry a sheni. Would I get malchus if I do? Nope. Because you don't get malchus on a lav haba mechal aseh. You don't get malchus on what? On a lav that's inferred from a positive. You get malchus from a lav. You don't get a what from something that's inferred. In Leisishma Ksiv, next. Nami. And for the Gemara, in Leisishma Ksiv. It says, if you, in Leisishma Uchad Rabavin, Am Rabbaloi, Am Rabavin, Am Rabbaloi, Kalmakam Shnemar, Hisham, Pen Va'al. Anytime the Torah uses Lashon Hisham, Pen Va'al, in Will Leisasa. So it says Leisishma. Sishma is a Shoirish Shabbat of Shin Mem Reish. So we know it's only going on lavim. It's not going on asay. We know with this limit of Rabbi Shmuel of the hekish, the two psukim next to each other, the hifla is not going on. It's only going on something. Only sishmar shomer is a lav and not an asay. Ihachi, if you have this again, using this limit again, lav she'em ba maisa nami, lav she'em ba maisa nami, a lav she'em ba maisa you should get malchus. And we said the only one who holds you don't is Rabbi Yehuda. We saw in the first parak. Alav Shem Malchus, fellas, you do not get Malchus. But 1 second, why not? It's a lav. Imlay Sishmar, it's a lav. And you should get Malchus and you don't. Says more lasais. Imlay Sishmar lasais. Lasais means to do. So since by asay, by Lav Shem Maisa, there's no lasais. So Mameli, you don't get Malchus. Says the Gemara, Lav Shenitak Lasay Nami. Do you get Malchus if you steal? Do you get malchus if what? If you send away if you take the bird without sending away the baby, the mother, if you take the chicks, these are all things that lav shenitik lasei. The heshiv is exela. Right? Go ahead. Hashem shivim. This, and yet we know you don't get malchus for that. But why not? If you're going to imlay sishmalas is going on kol Torah, and it says malchus, I'll call it Torah. So you should get malchus for what? For lavanitik. It says Gemara dumya de lav de chasima. Oh no. You know why you get malchus? You need similar to the lav of chasima. The lav, in other words, we said Hip Hashem Eskais. It says Hashem is, and we saw this earlier. Hip Hashem Eskais. It says that then it says the lav of a saxim shabedishar. When you get malchus, similar to the lav of a saxim, just like saxim is a maisa, you're muzzling. We said even you muzzle with your mouth, you yell at it. You would get malchus. You get malchus. Who adin? You would need You need a lavanitek is not similar to that. Not only lavanitek not similar to that, lav she'ein bein mais is not similar to that. So no longer do you need the limit of lasois, right? You have this comparison to the lav chasima to tell me you don't get malchus by lavanitek, nor do you get malchus by lav she'ein bein mais. As the Gemara concludes. Now that you come to this conclusion that in order to get malchus, it has to be right, similar to lav chasima. Kulanami dumi lav chasima. So guys, guess what? An asay is not similar. Lav b'machal asay is not similar to lav chasima. Lav anitak is not similar to lav chasima. And lav anitak, it's very geschmack. Okay, so now we have the shitas of Rabbi Shmuel. The shitas of Rabbi Shmuel in leisishma lasais, and it says right next to it malchus. So if you can get malchus on every lav, and including what all the chayvei mises bestin. And we have an exclusion for the extraneous lavanitak. Rebbe Kiva, my timer, Taka Rabbi Akiva that you only get what by Misa. In other words, why don't you get Malchus Achayv Misas Bezdin? Why don't you get Malchus on a lava Misas Bezdin? Says the Gemara, because it says he called the fun of Kedevish Asai, right? And what do we dashin? Shemishum Misha Achas Atam Achayv Avinat Nachayv Mishtei Meshuyas. This is source for Kamei B'Derab Minei. So I can't give you Misa and Malchus. I can't give you Misa and Malchus. Kedevish Asai. Kedevish Achas Atam Achayv Avinat Nachayv Mishtei Meshuyas. For Rabbi Yishmael, what does he do? What does he do with the limit of Kedevish Asai? What does Rabbi Yishmael do with that? Hani Mili. When do we say that? That's Misa Umamin. We won't make you pay and kill you. We'll kill you. By Malchus Umamin. Good. Aval Misa Umalchus, right? Misa and Malchus, Misa Richtehi. Guys, we'll view it as one thing. In other words, if you begin to hit the guy, you give him Malchus, and then you give him Herig, is Ein Zach. It's not two separate things. Today it's one thing. It's one. So, in other words, therefore, says Rabbi, in other words, Misa Richtehi, Malchus, the beginning of imposing physical punishment on an individual, which culminates in his death through another vehicle, be it skila, sreifa, herig, or chenek, is misa richtehi. Memela, you won't go ahead and apply the patur of kamle kedei rish asay, kedei rish achas atam achayvay. It's not shtei rishuyas; it's one rishus. That's the limit of Rabbi Yishmael. Why you would get malchus by chayvei misas bezdin? Says the Gemara, ul Rabbi Akiva. Ihachi chayve krisis nami, like Rabbi Akiva, guys. So Rabbi Akiva by kamle, why don't we say kamle by krisis and mat and malchus? That's a question of Rabbi Akiva. Now, Toisus Rashi answered it, fellas. Since you could do tshuva on the karis is by born, right? That Rashi did answer this. It says my amir. What are you going to say? This is part of the kasha. My amir. What are you going to say? Shemasa tshuva. That if he does tshuva on the karis, it's only one. Hashtami alay avde. As of yet, he hasn't done tshuva. Right. In other words, you're right. If he does tshuva, but as long as he doesn't do tshuva, you have two. What's kedei rishasai? So how can you give him malchus? If he does tshuva, right? Why doesn't he doesn't do tshuva? Why didn't it bleibt that Russia, bleibt that Russia, right? You know, like what are you going to do? So what does Rabbi Akiva do with this taina? It's a gewaldige taina. If he didn't do it, right? Okay. Amr Bavo, the favorite Shrips Torah Chayve Krisis the Malchus. Okay, we have a special limud, fellas, a special limud that, despite the fact that it's being two punishments, you will receive both Karis and Malchus. We have a special limud for that. Okay, what's the special limud? The favorite Shrips Torah Chayve Krisis the Malchus. The Gomar le'ene mile'enecha. It says, "V'isha sheyikach es achoso basav basimo." He takes his sister, right? V'ro es arvasa. This I just quoted this before. V'nichvasu le'ene b'nei Amon, avoinoi yisa. So it says, "V'nichvasu le'ene b'nei Amon." It says the keyword being le'ene, and it says, "Arboyim yakenu lo Yosef pen Yosef le'akos al eila makaraba v'nikla achicha le'enecha." So you have le'enei and you have le'enecha. So says Rabbi Avohu, to answer up the kasha on Rabbi Akiva, it says le'enei and it says le'enecha, just like le'enecha. Speaking about Malchus, so too le'enei, which is a chi of karis, being with your sister, you have a gzeres. No, but it's a gzeres hakosiv. It's a limud. Le'enei from le'enecha. Guys, the prefixes count over here. Le'enei, le'enecha. Good? Now, if you're telling me that you're making a limud, le'enei, mile'enecha, you're learning at karis in addition to Malchus, chayve mises bezdin nami nigmaron. Let's learn out chayve mises bezdin. Also, you should get Malchus according to Rabbi Akiva. Mi'enei, mile'enecha. Why does it say mi'enei? That's by avodah zara. It says by avodah zara, v'haya im me'ena eda nesel shkaga. So guys, so mem ayin nun yud le'enei. So we have. Let's learn out me'enei from le'enecha. So guys, look at me. Good. Let's come up for air. I have a limud, I have a limud einecha, le'einecha malchus. I have le'einei karis. For the Gemara, let's put in me'einei from le'einecha and learn just like le'einecha's karis. Me'einei chiyav misus bezdin. Avodah zarah is also karis, just like you learned out karis. It's also a malchus. Excuse me. Just like you learned out karis and malchus, you should learn out chayve misus bezdin and malchus. Me'einei from le'einecha, as I read the Gemara. And for the Gemara, done in le'einei le'einecha, the two lamids, ve'ein done in me'einei mi'leinecha. But we don't learn out me'einei from le'einecha. Again, I think it's always being Rabbi Chanan Zatzal. Said Rabbi Chanan, they had a Mesorah, which words were extra. And it's up to the Chacham to make the limud. It would make sense to say the limud is where the more dimyan it is, the lamid le'einei rather than mi'einei. It's a geshmak hezba. Because you could sit there and say, come on, what's a letter here or there? No. It's the Messiah had to learn this. So in other words, giving my druthers le'einei from Karis, le'einecha, I'll learn, but me'einei from Chiyav Misa le'einecha to Chiyav Malchus I will not learn. Fred Gemaru, my nafkamina. Vatana debei Rabbi Shmuel, and many times in Shas, when the Kohen's coming back to the house to see whether it's a house that has to be destroyed because it has tsaras, it says v'shava kohen u'baha kohen, zui shiva zui bia. It comes back the second time. V'oid ligma me'einei mileinei da'gama le'einei mileinecha. So now his geshmak. You're right. Watch this. I have le'einei from leinecha. Learn out me'einei from le'einei. In other words, learn out chayv misa from chayv kares. So if that's your impediment to going ahead and said chayv misas is not chayv malchus, that's not enough of an impediment. Learn out me'einei from einei le'einei. Okay, so this is the upshlag on Rabbi Vahu. So kibla minei Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, right? Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Excuse me. Kibla minei Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. He was makabel from Rabbi Vahu to explain the following: Kidei rish asai misham risha achas atam chayvoi. And which Risha is speaking about? The Risha HaMesuri LeBezdin HaKosim B'daber. So in other words, when do we go ahead and say Kamlei, Kedei Risha Asai? When they're both in my hands to go ahead and punish. Malchus, Misas Bezdin. Then we say what? Kedei Risha Asai. Get Misa, you don't get Malchus. But where the punishment is not in the hands of a bezdin to administer because it's a chi of kares, then there's no ketei rishasai. In other words, we're doing away with the limit of me'einei le'einei. We're doing away with that. You know the reason Rabbi Akiva says kares and malchus you get together? Ketei rishasai? Now, it's a ketei rishasai is because you do not say over there Kamlei when it's not in your jurisdiction or power to administer. When do you say it? That's when it's in your hands to do. So is Misa in my hands to do? Yes. Is Malchus in my hands to do? Yes. Is Malchus in my hands to do? Yes. Is Karas in my hands to do? No. The Mela, that's the reason Rabbi Akiva. Kedei Rishasai Ela Kiblu Minei Rabbi Vo is Makabal the Teretz. And now this is the reason for Rabbi Akiva. The reason for Rabbi Akiva is Kedei Rishasai Mishum Rishachas At Mechayvoi. Why it was Berisha Hamasur LeBezdin HaKosim B'daber. Berisha is speaking about the rishas that's in the hands of Bezdin to go ahead and administer. Okay, we'll stop over here.